And my pal, Kurt Bardella, he's an advisor to the DNC and the DCCC. Kurt, I'm going to start with you because, listen, this is not just the fringe folks. The GOP has essentially merged with extremists. I try to make this point as often as possible. It's not just their base voters, but their funders, their candidates. In fact, Monica Crowley, she's a former public affairs official in Trump's Treasury Department, took to Twitter to declare, this is it. This is the hill to die on. The New York Young Republican Club issued a lengthy statement condemning the continued persecution of Trump by totalitarian Democrats. His statement not only called for total disintegration of the FBI, but also suggested that acting beyond merely voting out the former president's enemies was required. I'm just curious, Kurt, from you, where do we go from here? Because the violence only increases with this political temper tantrum that we've already seen turn bloody more than once.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tiffany. I mean, everyone needs to understand that there is no division between the so-called establishment of the Republican Party and the fringe of the Republican Party. They are one and the same. And the tactics that we're seeing them employ are blessed and endorsed by the mainstream Republican Party. They are knowingly putting a target on the backs of law enforcement. They are knowingly putting their families in harm's way. And if anything tragic should happen to any member of our law enforcement community, these people have blood on their hands. These people should be held liable. These platforms that are spreading their personal contact information should be held responsible. And let's be very clear here. Devin Nunes was chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He knows all about sensitive information. He knows all about secret information. He knows and understands the value of identity and contact information. So for him to preside over a platform that is knowingly putting this sensitive and personal information up for other people to make these agents targets is unconscionable, and it frankly should be criminal. And if anything goes wrong, if anything happens, no one can sit there going, oh my God, we never saw this coming. How could this happen? We know exactly how it happened, and it was deliberate.
And absolutely. I think that's such a great point to make, Kurt. It was deliberate. Aslan, great reporting from you. I think social media, we have already seen how social media plays such a crucial role. In 2016, we saw the Russians infiltrate our democracy through the pathway of social media, specifically targeting Black voters. But now that Trump has engaged in these, essentially Twitter wannabe platforms, I'm just curious from you how you think that could potentially be weaponized when it comes to misinformation. The Washington Post did great reporting that TikTok will be a major place of misinformation. We know TikTok is owned by a foreign person from China. So I just curious your thoughts. What do you think?
Well, you mentioned the term Twitter wannabe earlier in terms of what Trump's attempt at building a social media empire, a MAGA social media empire, is right now. It's Truth Social, and at its very best form currently, it's a Twitter wannabe. Unfortunately for Trump, nothing more at the moment. So in terms of how much a player it's going to be in terms of online radicalization, I mean, that kind of has to do with how much popularity it's going to gain. And right now, that's a little bit questionable. But what we do know in terms of the level of MAGA-related popularity that it does have is that in recent days, ever since the FBI raid on Trump's home and private Florida club in Mar-a-Lago, Truth Social had become a haven in the way that other social media platforms and more, shall we say, mainstream social media platforms had not become for this type of doxed information on not just FBI personnel, the magistrate who signed off on this, but also their families. As you pointed out in the intro, the school that one of the kids went to was bandied about there and allowed to be left up for days and was not taken down until we reached out to Truth Social, which again is under Trump's control since he's the head honcho there. He's one of the founders. It's his company. They didn't take it down until after we reached out for comment and until after we published the story last night. And look, like, to make sure we weren't being completely unfair, because there are a lot of things that happen on a lot of different social media platforms that aren't necessarily the fault, shall we say, of the people who own them. We did a quick search on Twitter, we did a search on Twitter just to do one one-to-one comparison between Truth Social and Twitter.com, and we couldn't find any of the same doxed information that we were describing earlier about the FBI personnel or their families. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. Kurt, this is one of those times where I have to point out this party, the Republican Party, which is now, essentially the MAGA party, they purport themselves to be pro-life. That's their term, not mine, anti-choice. But I just wonder how they reconcile that they are the party that is allegedly pro-law enforcement, pro-life, yet here they are putting the information of a child out there, a child and the school this child attends on the heels of yet another mass shooting that claimed the lives of so many children. I just wonder how they navigate their own thought process and are so disillusioned with themselves.
Well, as my friend Congressman Eric Swalwell says, you can't be pro-cop and pro-coup at the same time. And that's exactly what they are. They walk around and masquerade with this term pro-life. But again, we just saw in Florida, somehow a child is not mature enough to have an abortion, but is mature enough to be forced to carry a baby to term. They say that they're pro-life, yet all of them, every single one of them, vote against the biggest climate change package we've ever had in our country's history to try to make sure that we are able to preserve life going forward. They vote against that. They say that they're pro-life, but they put law enforcement and their lives, their families' lives in jeopardy. Time and again, we see them say one thing and do another. They are not concerned with life. They are just concerned with trying to score cheap political points. They're concerned with trying to, quote unquote, own the libs. And they don't really care what wreckage is left in their wake. They are a destructive force in American politics. They are basically a domestic terrorist cell operating within America. Their goal is to end democracy. One of their leaders, Steve Bannon, has said very clearly multiple times, his goal is to tear everything down, to burn it all down. That's what they're trying to do. When someone reveals themselves to you, it's best to take them at face value. And time again, they have shown us who they are.